the newsagents.
It is the day after the bank holiday weekend from hell, where everything that could go wrong for the Conservative Party more or less did. It was worse than their worst nightmares.
So we know either that Andy Street has won or that he has nearly won. And whichever of those two turn out to be the result in this extremely exciting contest, it shows that the Conservative Party has done extremely well here in the West Midlands.
There's a lot to play for. No one should call this one too early. You wouldn't call a Premier League football match after about 30 minutes.
Well, look, the important thing is that we remain focused on the public's priorities and we continue to deliver on them. So, for example, we have a plan to get inflation down. That plan is working.
What the independent analysis shows that whilst of course this was a disappointing weekend for us, the result of the next general election isn't a foregone conclusion, and indeed actually is closer than, or the situation is closer than many people are saying, or indeed some of the opinion polls are predicting. And that's why I'm absolutely determined to fight incredibly hard for what I believe and for the future country that I want to build, and that's what I'm going to do. Fight for this country, fight for the things I believe, and deliver for everyone on the things that matter to them.
So Labour's been listening to all that and has accused the government of gaslighting the British public. Are they right to say that we're being told a pack of lies? Or could the economy suddenly start turning a corner? We speak to the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Welcome to the Newsagents.
It's John.
It's Emily.
So what was your favourite bit? What was your favourite bit of a weekend? Not of the results themselves, but the reaction to the results.
Post-match spin.
With a post-match spin, some of which was so absurd. It was priceless
Properly
comedy.
comical.
Yeah.
Andrew Mitchell, for example, saying he's either won or he's nearly won. It sounds like your average toddler sports day. You've all nearly won the race, except for one person who won. Except that
you lost.
Yeah, you lost.
You lost. So apparently, I'm told that this was a Downing Street special advisor who thought that would be a brilliant line to deploy. Apparently, I'm told that some of those around Andrew Mitchell thought, my God, this is straight out of the thick of it. And what a stupid line to be saying at a time like this. Well, we nearly won. Yeah, no prizes for nearly won in electoral politics. You win or you lose. It's pretty binary.
Well, unless you're the Prime Minister who manages to see pretty much his worst fears realised, which is nearly 500 council seats lost and every single mayoralty except one, and the worst by-election result in Blackpool South that he could have ever envisaged, and still comes out having extrapolated completely the wrong stat from the psephology on offer and says, I think it looks like a hung parliament from where I'm sitting. And you've actually had to get pretty senior psephologists to say, yeah, mate, you kind of misread this. That's not what the stats showed, and that's not how people tend to carry the vote from one local election to a bigger picture of a general election. Having to explain that to your Prime Minister, who is attached to his narrative, is pretty
Also, the line that the plan is working. Oh, really? So which bit of the plan was working at the polls on Thursday? I mean, I think that we need more time is clearly the argument. There's not going to be a summer election. It's almost impossible to see, particularly now the plot against Rishi has stopped. And Suella Braverman essentially saying, look, mate, you own this. This is your frigging mess, your chaos. You're going to pay the price for it, and we're going to regroup afterwards. And I think that's a recognition as well that no one has got time to turn it around. Even if there was a new standard bearer of the right who becomes leader of the Conservative Party, they change Prime Minister again without consulting the British people. I think they think, you know what, Rishi, this is your chaos.
Yeah, I mean, the plotters have kind of given up,
yeah.
Right? Never have we seen so little plotter passion before in the Conservative Party, right? It's just dissipated. They've all gone for a long lie down in a dark room, I think.
I've just got to talk about one other clip, which is the Science Minister Andrew Griffith, which was my favourite of the weekend. Andrew Mitchell runs him a close second, but doesn't quite win. It's Andrew Griffith when he says, it's too soon to call the general election. You wouldn't call a Premier League match after 30 minutes. No, you wouldn't, because you'd only be a third of the way through. We are not a third of the way through this parliament. We are deep into injury time, and you're 4-0 down, and it's hard to see you scoring 5 goals in the next kind of couple of minutes that are left of this game.
So I'm really interested in whether this is kind of the equivalent of body dysmorphia, just looking in the mirror and seeing something completely different reflected back at you, or whether they just have to find a narrative to get them through the next 6 months because they need foot soldiers, they need to just keep the show on the road until then.
Hang on, sorry. This isn't body dysmorphia. This is inverse body dysmorphia, technically, because the Tories are looking at themselves in the mirror and not going, God, I'm so ugly, I'm so revolting. They're looking at themselves in the mirror thinking, not so bad. Rather good looking. I think I can see why the electorate would find me deeply attractive.
Chiseled on this side, chiseled on the other. Yes, but weirdly, this next week may help them sell that narrative anyway. We're going to see some figures in the economy come out which might actually help their narrative quite a bit. And one is on Friday, when we're going to see inflation figures, some are predicting, will fall below the level of the Bank of England's target for the first time since Rishi Sunak's been in power. And it allows him to tell a story that actually, yeah, you see, we are turning a corner. Don't believe the naysayers. This is going better. We are going to see prices come down. Inflation's coming down. This will all trickle through to more money in your pocket. And this is the point at which Labour is trying to preempt that, get ahead of it and say, don't gaslight the British public. Here's a little clip of Rachel Reeves' speech from earlier this morning.
Here and I know that if we are to change our country, to invest sustainably in our public services, and to make working people better off, then building a stronger, more dynamic economy must come first. So today, I want to take head-on the claims that we can expect to hear from Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt in the weeks ahead, to tackle the economic fiction being peddled by government ministers, to show that the path towards decline is not inevitable, that Labour is ready to serve the interests of the British people and to make the case for change. By the time of the next election, we can expect, and we should expect, interest rates to be lower, Britain to be out of recession, and inflation to have returned to the Bank of England's target. Indeed, these things could happen this month. I already know what the Prime Minister and the Chancellor will say in response to one or all of these events happening. They've been saying it for months now. Our plan is working. The economy is turning a corner. Stick with us. In fact, that's almost exactly what the Prime Minister said in his statement following the disaster that was the Conservatives' local election performance last week. But I want to take those arguments head on, because they do not speak to the economic reality.
Well, hot foot from that speech. Rachel Reeves now joins us in the studio. And welcome, Shadow Chancellor. Thank you very much for being with us. So you say we're being gaslit by the Conservatives. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by it is the government are trying to paint a picture which is an alternative to reality, to what people are experiencing at the moment. And they keep saying our plan is working when people know it's not. They're saying we've turned a corner. People know that's not true. And Jeremy Hunt had the audacity to say that people should look out for the feel-good factor. Well, during the last few weeks of these local election campaigns, I've been right around the country talking to families, businesses, pensioners. That is just not how they are experiencing their lives at the moment. And it's like the government are trying to gaslight people into believing that there's something happening in the economy that no one is feeling.
But it sounds like Labour is slightly scared that things are improving or might improve. I mean, if on Friday the inflation rate goes below 2%, the Bank of England target for the first time, are you saying, oh no, ignore that, it is really terrible, it's going to carry on being terrible? Because that's its own kind of gaslighting, surely.
Well, there's three lots of numbers out this week. First of all, on Thursday, the Bank of England will make its interest rate decision. On Friday, it's the GDP numbers. And then on the 22nd of May, it's the inflation numbers. Now, the government want to go on some sort of victory lap for the economy not being in recession and inflation for the first time in 3 years meeting the Bank of England inflation target. Is that really the summit of their ambition? Keir Starmer and me, we wouldn't be going on a victory lap if our economy was
But you'd like
technically
to
out
see
of
it. You'd be
recession.
enthusiastic, wouldn't you? Wouldn't
Well,
Labour
but
be happy with that?
the point is, it is their economic mismanagement and chaos that has caused the situation to be so bad these last few years. And my ambition for Britain is just so much greater than not being in recession. If you look at the forecasts, for example, from the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, they say that the UK will have the second slowest growth in the G7 this year and the slowest growth in the G7 next year. I don't think that's cause for celebration, and yet the government seem to think that this is somehow some big success story and this is their measure of turning a corner.
Rachel, so what is the summit of your ambition? Because I listened to Darren Jones on the radio this morning. Is there a big idea other than we're going to run it better, it's not going to be a crisis, it's not going to be...
So I think there's two questions you're asking there. First of all, what is success? And second, how are you going to get there? So success is working people feeling and being better off. And that is not what working people are experiencing today. Then the second question is, how do you get there? And I've set out a programme based on stability, investment and reform. So stability, so that people can plan for the future, businesses and also families.
That's not what you asked at all.
That's not my question.
I think you're saying, what's your big idea to achieve it?
But
you asked me, what does success look like for me? And it's
well,
not
I didn't
just...
quite frame it like that.
Okay,
I said, what is... I mean, I cannot think of a single previous election where Labour have gone into it and not had a sort of central policy idea. You know, I mean, you go back to 97, it was the minimum wage. And we would learn later about the ideas about Bank of England
independence.
Yeah. But what is the single standout policy where you go,
Well, I can give you a number of them.
No, I want a single kind of eye-catching. I know there are a number of small policies. I'm just trying to think of...
Well, let me give you one example of something that can help grow the economy. We're going to create a national wealth fund endowed with £7.3 billion of public money to bring in private sector investment to invest alongside government in some of the industries of the future: carbon capture and storage, gigafactories for electric vehicles, renewable-ready ports, floating offshore wind. And we think that we can bring in 3 times as much private investment as the government puts down in public investments. That's more than £20 billion of private investment. And the exciting thing about these opportunities is this is not going to be jobs in London and the South East. This is going to be jobs in places like Teesside, Merseyside, Grangemouth, the Hull estuary, places where we need good jobs paying decent wages, and it will also contribute to lower energy bills and also our national energy and economic security.
That is a very big macroeconomic picture. I'm just kind of, someone listening at home just says, OK, what will be different?
This is about good jobs, lower bills and our national security through energy security. 3 big things right now: getting Putin's boot off our necks so that we have more homegrown domestic energy, lower bills after the ups and downs and mainly ups we've seen in energy bills the last few years, and good jobs paying decent wages. Because although we have high levels of employment, there are still too many people who are going out to work but not having the security of a job that pays a wage that they can afford to live on. So our ambition is good jobs and productivity in all parts of the country, and one of the ways to achieve that is through this national wealth fund. We're one of the few countries, developed countries in the world, that doesn't have some sort of national or sovereign wealth fund. This would create that, and its focus would be on those good jobs paying decent wages and lower bills, and those good jobs outside of London and the South East to drive that regional growth that we want to see.
You've talked repeatedly about the importance of people's feelings when you look at the economy, how people are, whether they're, better off than they were 4 years ago. You can't live on feelings. You, of all people, know that you have to believe in stats, you have to believe in data, you have to believe in independent bodies, because feelings takes us to Trump land, and you have Americans saying they don't feel better, even though, for example, we can see in macroeconomic terms what has happened to the economy under Joe Biden.
Well, I was an economist at the Bank of England for many years, and I love a spreadsheet and a graph. But in the end, what matters is whether people are better off and whether they feel that and see that in their bank balances.
But don't
And-
people always say that they feel worse off? I mean, isn't that what they always say to politicians?
Well, no. And at the moment, it's not. People feel worse off because they are worse off. This is going to be the first parliament on record where living standards are lower at the end of the parliament than they were at the beginning. So this is where feelings coincide with reality. People feel worse off because they are worse off. That is the legacy of 14 years of Conservative government.
Let's talk about the election, the local elections over the weekend. The Prime Minister's now talking about what he imagines to be a hung Parliament result in the general. I don't think anyone can take away the scale of your success at the locals and the mayorals this weekend without sounding pretty out of touch, to be frank. But you will recognise the agitation, the deep unhappiness on your left. That is presumably not something that you can ignore now. Former Labour supporters going to the Green Party and others because they think you've got the Gaza situation so wrong. Is that a worry for you longer term?
Well, nobody could be not moved by the situation we're seeing unfold on the television screens, including this weekend. And we have urged in the strongest possible terms Israel not to invade Rafah. And we're seeing now people displaced multiple times from their homes, the risks of malnutrition in Gaza. And it is deeply concerning. It's why we've said there must be an immediate ceasefire.
Your left isn't hearing that.
Well,
they're
no,
not
and
hearing that you've said that. They're
And
hearing that
we
you
need
were
to do more.
slow to it.
We need to do more to win back the support. I always find it disappointing when people find a reason that they cannot vote for the Labour Party, and we need to understand those concerns and we need to rebuild trust in those communities.
How?
Well, look, I think first of all we need to communicate what our policy is better, but I think also we need to spend time talking to people from those communities and understand
You've got
what we can do
students
to
gathering
rebuild
on
trust.
campuses around the UK right now. They've got a very direct question for Labour, for all politicians, which is, will you sign up to the Palestinian movement to boycott, divest and sanction Israeli goods?
No, we won't do that. And that is not going to help people in Gaza by doing that. But what we have called for is an immediate ceasefire, the bringing of aid into Gaza, and then ultimately building towards the two-state solution. Because in the end, the only way you are going to have security for people in Israel and in Palestine is a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable Palestinian state. And that has been on the back burner for too long, and we would make it a central part of our foreign policy to achieve that two-state solution so that the Palestinians have a homeland.
Rachel, you talked about you need to communicate better. Did you communicate badly? Did Keir Starmer communicate badly when he came on LBC and spoke to Nick Ferrari at the start of this and just went so far that it alienated a lot of your Muslim supporters? Do you accept that?
Well, I think Keir has said since then that his words were taken out of context, and he has
Do you
sought
think he
to clarify.
communicated well?
Look, well, he sought to clarify those remarks, but it's also been a very fast-moving situation, and on the 7th of October, when those hostages were taken from a music festival, from kibbutzes, the violence against civilians, against women and children, was inexcusable. Nothing can ever justify those sorts of actions, and there are still Israeli hostages held in tunnels under Gaza, and a ceasefire works both ways. Those hostages must be freed, and there's no ifs and buts about that, but at the same time Israel needs to make sure that aid is getting into Gaza, because there is a humanitarian catastrophe right now in Gaza with risks of malnutrition, with tens of thousands of innocent civilians losing their lives. They're not responsible for what Hamas did, but they're now ones paying the price, and that is not acceptable either.
What does Labour do then when it's faced with the Muslim vote group who says it will support like-minded candidates in a general election? What do you do when you've got some of the old left, maybe some of the Corbyn left, who've gone to the Green Party? Do you say, that's fine, we'll let you do that? Or do you try and win them back, even if they're people who might have faced accusations of anti-Semitism in the party before?
Where people have got legitimate concerns about Labour's stance on Gaza, and when they want to hear...
What would be legitimate?
Well, look, I think if somebody has anti-Semitic views, then they've got no place in the Labour Party, and I'm not seeking to.
And do you think those are the people
votes.
that have gone to
well,
the
you
Greens?
you just suggested that there were people with those views, and if you've got anti-Semitic views, the Labour Party is not your home. But people who are concerned about the situation they see unfolding in Gaza, we share those concerns about the lack of aid getting into Gaza. We share your concerns about the lack of a ceasefire. We share your concerns, about the lack of a
money
move
spent
towards
on
a two-state solution.
weaponry to Israel. I mean, you've raised the question of if it is illegal, if Israel is committing war crimes, and obviously you wouldn't send money to aid Israel in that
and
way.
international humanitarian law is very clear on that point. If there's a risk that arms are going to be used
But you don't
in a way
know
that
if that's
commits
true or not then?
war crimes. Look, I'm not a lawyer. I'm certainly not an international rights lawyer. I'm an economist, and that's where my expertise lie. But I do know that international law is very clear on that point.
Can we just talk about something else, which is sort of Rosie Duffield? And there's been a suggestion that maybe Keir Starmer ought to apologise to her for the way she was treated. She was the Labour backbencher who took a line on sort of trans issues, which kind of almost made her a pariah within the Labour Party. We've since had the Cass report into the treatment of teenagers at the Tavistock Institute in London. Do you think you do owe Rosie Duffield an apology?
Oh, well, look, Rosie is a valued colleague and a member of the parliamentary Labour
vilified.
Party. I haven't seen Rosie for a while because I've mainly been out on the campaign trail rather than in Parliament like other Labour MPs have. So I haven't had a chance to speak to her
She said
about
she hasn't spoken to Keir Starmer in 2 years. I just wondered when you last spoke to her.
Well, I've certainly spoken to Rosie in the last couple of years, much more recently than that, but I haven't spoken to her since the publication of the Cass review because I've been mainly out, particularly in Yorkshire where I'm an MP, but around the country campaigning in these local elections. But, I know that Wes Streeting, who is the Shadow Health Secretary responsible for these areas of policy, has, accepted the recommendations of the Cass review.
Isn't that a bit weird, though, Rachel? Isn't it weird to not want to bury the hatchet? I mean, to not want to hear from the leader on that question.
Well, look, I don't know what conversations Keir Starmer has had.
They haven't had any.
But every
She said
week,
they haven't had any.
But every week the Parliamentary Labour Party meets. Keir will be speaking at the Parliamentary Labour Party this week. So
well,
there's
let me ask you
opportunities.
very directly. Does the Labour leadership owe Rosie Duffield an apology?
Rosie deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. I think that Keir always treats colleagues with that dignity and respect. So I'm not sure what the specific thing that Keir is being asked to do is, but I know that Keir has got a lot of time for all of our colleagues, including Rosie.
Can I just ask you a final question? I was with some Labour supporting people who were kind of involved, and they were saying that Keir Starmer is bloody lucky that the Tories have been so bad because basically his instincts on everything, he gets it wrong the first time round. And you talk about Israel Gaza, you talk about trans issues, you talk about 28 billion. I could go on with a whole list of things where you've seen Keir Starmer row back from the initial policy that he adopted. That is a fair criticism, isn't it?
Keir became leader of the Labour Party after our worst defeat since 1935. Most people, when he became leader, said, good luck, mate, but you haven't got a chance. And here he is, 20 points ahead in the opinion polls after a fantastic set of local results. He's dealt with anti-Semitism in the party. He's put the Labour Party back in the service of working people. That's not luck. That is sheer hard work and graft, and that's what Keir's put in these last 4 years.
I don't doubt that, but do you recognise that there have been a number of policies
where
he's had to kind of reverse?
I don't recognise that criticism, and what I see in Keir is somebody who's determined to make the Labour Party serve the interests of the British people once again after moving well away from that for many years.
Rachel, I want to end where we started, and it's very natural for the Labour Party, any party in opposition, to say we don't want to get complacent about, whatever's happened or how people are voting or the rest of it. But just take us inside the Labour sort of mindset over the last weekend. When you said you weren't expecting to win West Midlands, when we look at the mayoralties, which of those really genuinely came as a surprise to you and the Labour leadership, and which would you quietly tell us you thought you probably could?
Well, I'm a Leeds MP, and the Yorkshire results for me, the North Yorkshire result in particular, was massive. This is Rishi Sunak's own backyard. This is a new mayoralty that the Conservatives would have expected to win in their heartlands. And Labour's candidate, David Skaith, won with a resounding majority. And it was particularly enjoyable.
Was that more unexpected than Andy Street losing in the West Midlands?
Labour's never been able to command results like that in North Yorkshire before, and so it was particularly sweet to win in Rishi's backyard, and for Keir Starmer and me on Friday afternoon to go to Rishi Sunak's own constituency in Richmond and celebrate that success with our new mayor there. But of course, Richard Parker's success against Andy Street with the narrowest of margins, the Conservatives said success for them would be holding on to Teesside and the West Midlands. They failed in the West Midlands. Labour secured a victory there, which I think, given the number of marginal seats in Wolverhampton, in Dudley and in other areas of the West Midlands, was very important for us to pick up that mayoralty too.
Do you think the Tories would be better off getting rid of Rishi?
Well, look, that's up to them and whoever they...
As a spectator?
Well, I'm not a spectator, am I? Look, it's up to them to decide their leader, and whoever they choose. We just want to get on with this general election, because I think the country showed on Thursday that they're crying out for change, and they deserve that vote in a general election.
Shadow Chancellor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's hard to give Rachel Reeves a real bashing over the head over Labour and its performance, coming off the back of local council elections and the mayoral elections, which have been pretty much a stunning success for them. The by-election in Blackpool, the taking of West Midlands, the North Yorkshire mayoralty, and on it goes. They did pretty bloody well. And, Labour have got a good story to tell at the moment in the glow of the post-election. It's going to get tougher between now and the general election, when they're going to come under more pressure over what they would do in government. And I still think there are little chinks of light where they need to kind of have a bit of a more watertight answer.
The listeners won't have seen the way Rachel Reeves' face kind of lit up when she was actually telling us about the West Midlands. That was not expected. They did not have that on their dance card at all. And I think you also got that sense of why taking the North York seat was so big for the mayoralty for Labour. Again, it hadn't really come into their equations. So I think, cephalogically, they are in a sort of very comfortable place right now, even when they're being attacked by somebody on their left flank, as happened in West Mids, where 20% of the vote went to an independent. They still managed to pull off that absolute Tory upset by unseating, somebody genuinely admired and respected and really quite liked, Andy Street, for the West Midlands mayoralty. But I think when you look around the edges of this, your question to her was, where's your big retail offering? Right, what's the thing that gets me out of bed, that gets me to the polls? And she's right to kind of go through, her listicle, her sort of a bit of this and a bit of this and a bit of that. There's nothing that's really...
long-term dealing with energy prices so that the President Putin's jackboot is off our neck.
Yeah, and she was really uncomfortable, I have to say, on all the areas around Rosie Duffield. There was not a sense, I think, from what she was saying about the leadership, that there's going to be any concession to what went on there. We still don't know where Diane Abbott is sitting in terms of, is she back in the fold? There are all these sort of MPs who feel slightly peripheral to the central project of the Labour Party. And I wonder if they're going to keep it like that. If we lose people to the Greens, so be it. If we lose, Corbyn and Diane Abbott and the others, so be it. If Rosie Duffield carries on being a bit pissed off with Keir Starmer, so be it. Are they happy just to sort of play that long?
I just think they want to shut certain issues down. They want to be talking about the economy, strong, stable, secure. Well, it would be pretty exceptional if Labour went into the election saying we want weak, unstable and insecure. They're never going to do that. So it's sort of motherhood and apple pie. And that's what I think about the 5 missions that Labour are selling. It's not a retail offering in the way that you would normally expect in a general election.
Because they think they don't need to.
Well, because they think they don't need to. And that, of course, there's 6 months more scrutiny that will take place, and it will get a lot hotter in a general election campaign. And that's when they've got to make sure that everything is totally bomb-proof. At the moment, you'd say it's looking pretty damn good and that they don't need to do much, and that nothing that the Tories have thrown at them has yet closed the gap. And going into the last set of council elections, as we just have done, my God, it was a catastrophe for the Tories.
Yeah, and I think if you're Rishi Sunak right now, you are pushing the election back as far as you possibly can. I think playing for time is all you've got. I think you always hold the possibility that something implodes for Labour, either on its left flank or that they make a massive misstep. I think what we see now is it's not policies per se, it's about misjudging the public mood. And there was always the chance, I think, for any leader to do that, any politician from either side to do that. And that will probably be where Rishi Sunak is sort of pinning his hopes right now, that he gets a few good figures on the economy and he leaves it long enough, like the ping pong game, to see the other guy make a mistake.
Yeah, and we'll talk on the US edition of this podcast a lot about the October surprise, which you always think, what is the thing that is going to come along and that will upset the apple cart and derail things? And kind of when Trump got elected in 2016, it was the FBI reopening the email investigation into Hillary Clinton. Rishi Sunak is waiting for a moment like that where Labour kind of panic because something terrible has happened or something comes out like that. At the moment, you feel he needs a black swan event.
Yeah.
Because the way things are stacked at the moment, it feels that, nothing that the Tories are saying or doing is making any difference.
The dial has not shifted for 2 years.
No. The British people, it feels, have made up their mind. They're not really listening. Just give me a general election. Please, can we get this over with? In case you hadn't noticed, Liz Truss has been on a book tour, selling the 100,000 words of her 49 days in office. And she was asked by GB News, who is your favourite Conservative leader? The answer was surprising.
Other than Churchill and Thatcher, I wondered, who are your favourite Tory leaders?
Well, I like Javier Milei.
Well, it took a long time to get there. I mean, I bet you thought the podcast had suddenly cut out. I thought the podcast had suddenly cut out listening to that clip. Javier Milei is the new president of Argentina. Libertarian, kind of wild, interesting,
the guy who
fascinating.
said he was going to take a chainsaw to the Argentine economy to get it in shape again, which I suppose is exactly what Liz Truss, in essence, did to ours. Anyway, this week, the same question was asked to Javier Milei by a BBC journalist, Arnie Wells. Have a listen.
Liz Truss recently said that you were her favourite Conservative leader. Do you admire her?
¿Quién?
Who?
Liz Truss, la ex primera ministra británica.
No tengo elementos como para...
I don't have elements to give an opinion.
Okay,
but
I think she was what we call a pointless answer. The only thing you don't want somebody to say when your name is mentioned is ¿Quién? Yeah.
It was absolutely brilliant. It was just a pause, like, kind of, none of this is computing. I have no idea who you are talking about. And, the translator has to say, oh, well, actually, we're talking about the British Prime Minister. Yeah, well, I've got no reference points to make any comment whatsoever.
Yeah.
Don't know anything about her.
Yeah, he kind of says, libertarians like me and conservatives like her, I'm sure they're all very similar, but it wasn't quite what old Liz was probably waiting for.
Yeah. The name of Liz Truss, the fame, has not reached Buenos Aires. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.